Have you ever stopped and wondered if maybe, just maybe, nature itself holds the best tools for healing its own wounds? Today, we're diving into a really incredible story of ecological recovery. We're going to see how a legendary American landscape, the oak savanna, is being brought back from the brink. And get this, it's not with harsh chemicals, but with a super clever, living solution to a really nasty invasive problem.
It really all boils down to this one fundamental question that land managers and ecologists are wrestling with every single day. How do you truly heal a wounded ecosystem? And maybe more importantly, how do you turn back the tide of an invasion, not just for a season or a year, but for good?
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the oak savanna's struggle. Then we'll take a hard look at the common go-to solution, herbicides, and why it often falls short. After that, we'll get to the good stuff, a living, native solution. We'll see the science in action, and finally we'll talk about the big picture, the ultimate goal, restoring the entire ecosystem's function. Okay, let's jump right in with the heart of the problem. We're talking about the oak savanna struggle. This is such an iconic ecosystem, and believe me, it is under some serious threat. Right now, all across the Midwest, these beautiful, wide-open oak savannas are just being swallowed up. And the culprits? Well, they're invasive brush, especially non-native honeysuckle and buckthorn. They form these dense, dark thickets that are just impenetrable. And this isn't just an eyesore, it is a full-blown ecological disaster. It literally chokes out all the native wildflowers and grasses that are supposed to be there, and it poisons the very soil they need to survive.
So how have we been fighting this invasion? Well, that brings us to the usual approach and, frankly, its limits. I'm talking about herbicides. This is almost always the story of a short-term fix that ends up having some pretty serious long-term costs.
For decades, the playbook has been really simple. You see the invasive brush, you spray the invasive brush, and that's led to a heavy, and I mean heavy, reliance on chemical herbicides. But you got to step back and ask the question, is this actually solving the problem, or are we just stuck on a hamster wheel, endlessly treating the same symptom over and over again? This slide really just lays it all out, the two paths you can take. On one side, you've got what we can call the chemical treadmill, right? Just think about it. High costs, year after year, potential harm to other plants and animals, degraded soil life, and you have to keep doing it forever. It's a war you just never seem to win. But on the other side, there's a totally different idea, the ecological flywheel. This is all about building long-term value, supporting biodiversity, actually enriching the soil, and creating a system that over time starts to sustain itself. It's a huge shift from just fighting the bad guys to actively empowering the good guys. And that ecological flywheel idea, well, that brings us to this powerful alternative, a living, native solution. This is the moment where we shift our entire way of thinking from just simple control to true holistic restoration. The philosophy behind all this is actually a well-established principle. It's called Integrated Pest Management, or IPM. It's basically an ecosystem-based strategy that uses a whole toolbox of different techniques to prevent problems long-term. And here's the key difference. Chemical controls are seen as the absolute last resort, not the first thing you reach for.
This whole approach is being championed by experts like Nick Fuller over at Natural Communities. He actually calls it Fly-Wheel-Ecology, and his goal is, and I'm quoting here, to use the best science and management techniques to kickstart the ecosystem's own recovery. See? It's a fundamental change toward working with nature, not just constantly fighting against it. So what's the number one tool in this new toolbox? It's something that's both incredibly simple and amazingly powerful. Native plants. Instead of just killing the invasive species and leaving a big empty space for them to come right back, this approach immediately introduces a dense community of native species that are perfectly adapted to grow there. They become a living, breathing biological control, outcompeting the invaders for sunlight, for water, for nutrients, for the long haul.
Okay, so that's the theory, and it sounds great, right? But how does it actually play out in the real world? Let's take a look at the science in action. This is the practical blueprint for restoration. And look, this isn't just some vague concept. It's a very practical, repeatable technique. First up, site prep. Use tools like prescribed fire or mowing to clear out the bad guys. Second, and this part is absolutely crucial, is high-density native seeding. You immediately get in there with fast-growing cover crops like native wild rye to quickly take over that space. Third, you monitor. You watch that new native community get established. And finally, the best part, the end goal, you start to wean off the herbicides as the native plants become dominant and take care of things themselves. And the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. Or in this case, the data. This chart shows the results from real restoration sites that used this exact technique. Just look at this. On the left, the amount of invasive species cover absolutely plummets. And on the right, the native species richness, that's the number of different types of native plants, it just explodes. The data couldn't be clearer. You're not just getting rid of a problem. You are actively building a healthier, more diverse, more beautiful ecosystem in its place.
So all of this work, all these steps, they all lead to the ultimate goal, restoring ecosystem function. This is about so much more than just having pretty flowers. It's about rebuilding a working, resilient natural system from the ground up. This timeline really shows you that long-term vision. It's a journey, right? In year 1, yeah, there's active intervention, the burning, the seeding. For the next few years, it's all about establishment. That native plant community is growing, it's strengthening. But by year 5 and beyond, you reach the real goal, resilience. The ecosystem becomes self-sustaining. It can actually resist new invasions all on its own. That flywheel is spinning, and it's built to keep on spinning.
So the real key takeaway here, the big idea, is a fundamental shift in our mindset. It's about moving away from fighting a constant war on weeds and instead focusing on building a resilient native community. It's a shift from just seeking temporary control to achieving permanent restoration. The formula is just so clear. Good science plus native seeds is way more powerful than just herbicide alone.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought to chew on. We've spent so much time and energy searching for new chemicals, new machines, new ways to fight back against ecological damage. But what if our best tool for ecological restoration is restoration itself? What if the answer was right there, growing under our feet the whole time?